President Xi Jinping has made targeted poverty alleviation a cornerstone of his domestic agenda. Because for China to truly become a moderately prosperous society by 2020, not a single Chinese citizen should be living below the line of extreme poverty. Empowering words with actions, President Xi visited numerous poor counties and villages all across China, 14 regions at last count, asserting the party's commitment to eliminate poverty. The results, not unexpected, have been large allocations of state funds and a massive campaign by officials who feel the pressure and dare not hinder Xi's commitment. The results have been remarkable. About 10 to 14 million people per year have been brought out of poverty. But ancillary problems have developed, especially corruption and falsification of data. How to control such problems? Even more important, how to enter people into poverty status and exit them from it with strict, standardized, and transparent criteria. And longer term, how can China assure that those people brought out of poverty stay out of poverty? What happens after leadership achieves the goal? How then can poverty alleviation be sustainable? Finally, a global question. Can China's targeted poverty alleviation help other countries? That's closer to China. I have been focusing on President Xi Jinping's targeted poverty alleviation campaign. I've come to Guizhou province in southwestern China, one of the poorest regions of the country, so that closer to China can examine relocation, the method most unique to China in its 5 ways of lifting people out of poverty.
I'm in
Weishui County of the Bui and Miao Autonomous Prefecture of Jinan. This is a resettlement site for poor villagers living in remote mountainous areas. A CPC cadres meeting was held to discuss ways to improve the lives of the relocated villagers. The county government offers training classes to those who were relocated but couldn't find a job. It was in this cooking class that I met Yan Qijin, a 27-year-old young man who invited me to his family meal. The marketplace he frequents is the largest and cheapest in the area, which makes the 5-kilometer motorcycle trip a reasonable distance to travel. At lunch with his wife and 4 brothers, Yang talked about his aspiration to become a cook. His dream is to earn 7,000 yuan per month to support his family. Reality, though, is rather bleak. He and his 4 brothers are farmers by birth and have no other skills suitable for urban life unless they would settle for low-paying jobs such as janitor or busboy. What's worse, they had to start paying for food, which back in the village they could grow themselves, and paying for utilities, which was supposed to be free for 3 years. While they did receive compensation for relocation, according to the Yan family, the money fell far short of what was promised. Where did all those stipends and allocations go? Poor villagers wonder. Was it an honest mistake, a miscalculation perhaps? Or something more sinister like embezzlement? In grand projects, some things always go wrong. The CPC is determined to address corruption and poverty alleviation. With 2020 approaching, the stakes have never been higher. Looking back at the last decade, specifically since the 18th Party Congress, what have been the biggest challenges or problems? What were the causes of them? And how did you seek solutions?
The problems include no implementation or improper implementation of the policies or fortification, lip service, image projects, and so on, which call for strengthened efforts in inspections and punishment. We need to first change their work style, and then we also need to train and educate them, because some of the cadres are not really unwilling to work, Rather, they haven't got the right methods. So we need to enhance their capabilities and train them with the skills to do the work well. And most importantly, all our poverty alleviation work should be centered around precision poverty alleviation and build up the poor's confidence after household-based and individual-based analyses. The government policies should encourage people to fight for a happy life by their own efforts.
With hundreds of billions of RMB focused on poverty alleviation, that's an enormous amount of money that is effectively being controlled at the lowest levels of government. Has there been problems of corruption where local officials take some of the money into private accounts or use it for building local party buildings or entertainment rather than focusing it directly on the poor?
Yes, after an increase in the Poverty Alleviation Fund, the prevention of fund embezzlement and appropriation became an issue. Actually, this is the challenge we have been facing since 1986, and we haven't properly addressed it yet. However, with a series of policies and mechanisms, we are achieving positive results out of it. Mainly, our efforts cover several aspects. First, we have set up a set of relatively effective systems in fund allocation, management, and supervision. And I think one of the key factors is going open and being transparent.
When you look at the accumulation of data that you get from the grassroots, and I've been there and I've seen the files that each family has, it's very impressive. How accurate do you think that represents reality? And then when you get that data collectively back in Beijing and combine it together, what's your confidence level that that really represents reality?
This is a very tough process that calls for continued painstaking efforts. From my own experiences, I still remember that back in 2015, as we looked into the data of the registered poor, we discovered a lot of discrepancies as compared to our investigation results. The actual registration was started in 2014, and so was the precise identification program. So in 2015, we were looking into the numbers recorded in 2014. The differences actually indicated certain problems with the numbers initially kept in the system.
This is quite a headache, but it is still solvable. In the past, before we launched the precision poverty alleviation, the numbers of poor people reported by the locality were always bigger than those from the National Bureau of Statistics. Their purpose was quite clear. They wanted to apply for the national policies and subsidies. Now, the number is still relevant, but in terms of top-level design, we will allocate the fund based on your performance. The better your work is, the more subsidies you're entitled to apply for. Secondly, we make use of social supervision. If we want to verify the numbers single-handedly by ourselves, we cannot even get round to visiting poor villages and counties in Beijing. However, the facts are clear among the villagers themselves. They know pretty well who are the impoverished ones in the village with no need of investigations and examinations. So we have invited the general public in as we launch the registration systems. The people vote for the households and individuals who are eligible. For any inaccuracies in the figures, they can whistleblow. So what is difficult for the government to verify is actually easy for the locals. So by making use of their knowledge, inviting their participation, together with social supervision and strict government investigation, we can bring down the chance of false or inaccurate information. It's not really possible to be 100% true to fact, but we aim to be basically accurate, with an accuracy of around 95% or 98%.
How would you classify the specific categories of problems or issues that you have to look to broadly across the whole concept of poverty alleviation, and then as it gets more difficult today with the intractably poor, those who general economic growth will not help because they're too isolated or infirm or whatever. So we're looking at the broad picture of the category of problems and then the specific ones that occur today.
I think we face a challenge in two aspects. First, among the remaining poor people, quite a number of them are still in remote areas where transportation and education are really poor. Those are regions that are called deep in poverty. And the poverty alleviation methods for them have to be different from the former ones. As a matter of fact, between 2013 and 2016, the poverty issues we dealt with were more due to a lack of income sources or housing, education, and health problems. Deep poverty actually requires more comprehensive measures and more investment than before so as to ensure the elimination of poverty by 2020. Then, for the newly generated poor population, how can we include them in the system in a timely manner and effectively tailor our poverty alleviation methods to their needs also constitutes a very demanding challenge.
就是还有3年时间，现在总的这个面儿上啊。
Now, 3 years before the deadline, we are generally quite confident in achieving the goal. But what we are actually concerned with are 2 issues. First, how should we deal with the extremely poor regions? The ethnic minority and border areas have actually taken a jump into the socialist society right from a slave society, which means development in these areas has been lagging behind for long and the infrastructure has been really poor. So we have to take them as a priority in our plan and ensure that progress is made on a continued basis. Second, poverty alleviation needs an input of funds. Though money itself is not a big issue, how to allocate it accurately is. It calls for correct ideology, ways and methods, internal momentum for growth and so on, with which I'm actually quite concerned. So our next step falls on the working style of government officials at all levels. These are all more important than the money itself and keeps me concerned.
我们担心的就是这2个问题。 中国的扶贫不会停止。
We'll not stop our efforts, nor reduce the intensity of investment. Rather, we will only strengthen our policy support.
要解决发展国家贫困问题。
In order to address poverty in developing countries, we should enhance the self-development capabilities of people in poverty-stricken areas and enable them to benefit from the country's development.
China has very relevant experience in industrializing, in creating large numbers of jobs for people.
扶贫啊，这个就是要。
The goal of our poverty alleviation is actually about creating sustainable development for the poor.
In his report to the 19th CPC National Congress, General Secretary Xi Jinping pledged that all poor regions and poor people will be raised above the poverty line by 2020 under existing standards. To lift people out of poverty takes more than giving them nice houses and adequate stipends. Helping people acquire know-how is essential. Most of the people I met in the cooking class were almost illiterate. The cook trainee who was the most well-educated only completed junior high school. To gain a skill would be crucial in changing people's lives and sustaining momentum. Even as these poor people are no longer poor by official definitions, they are still poor in terms relative to their urban counterparts. Looking beyond the target date of 2020, the sustainability of their livelihoods will become the new focus. Sustainability will demand attention and new creative programs. When you look beyond 2020, what does it take to make the whole anti-poverty campaign really sustainable?
这个扶贫啊，这个就是要。
The goal of our poverty alleviation is actually about creating sustainable development for the poor. There are some issues of special importance that we have to take care of. First, we need to address the issue of education, improve their overall quality, make them adapt to changes in life, and increase their abilities for self-sustained development. Second, we need to insist on our long-term policy research and tailor certain policies according to their specific needs. For poor households, we need to apply the Chinese saying that teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So it is better for us to teach the poor a certain skill to offer them a lifelong source of income. Only in this way can we achieve sustainability in our poverty alleviation efforts. If we only offer policies, subsidies, or some one-time help, they will face danger of slipping back to poverty again.
So at the end of the day, if they don't move and you can't, and you don't have the legal power to force them to move, you can then apply other methods to those people, giving them subsidies or additional benefits, so that their total their total life experience and income is above the poverty line. So then the next big question is, if you've achieved that through these additional subsidies, how can you make that sustainable, over the long period?
For those who are not willing to get relocated for the moment, we will definitely take other measures to help them out. And there are multiple means that can help. For instance, I can name a few measures here. We can encourage them to get involved in our agricultural development program, or offer them jobs as forest keepers or other environmental protectors nearby, etc. So for many measures for poverty alleviation, we should comprehensively apply them to eradicate poverty. Then, after 2020, when we have successfully lifted the poor out of poverty, as I said, we will continue with our policies and support for a while in order to guarantee that work is sufficiently carried out and they are secured out of poverty forever. This is the goal we strive for.
What is it about the issue of sustainability? 2020 and elimination of all extreme poverty is this major goal, and assuming it gets done, as we all assume it will, but what does that mean on a long-term basis? For a family that is below the poverty line to get just above the poverty line, then we say it's all finished. It was not all finished. If you're just above the poverty line in China, in a local area, that's still a standard of living that's orders of magnitude below what ordinary citizens in the major cities have. So what is the thinking beyond 2020?
In order to address this problem, the report of the 19th CPC National Congress has actually presented 3 solutions. First, China still has to fight poverty through development. This is the way to provide an undereducated population with income sources. That is to say, further ahead, we have to consider ways of development that guarantee benefits for the poor. I think this is the experience China has accumulated over the past 30+ years in poverty alleviation, and also an important method China has to resort to for addressing poverty in the future. Second, China may need to establish a more comprehensive social security network to offer guarantees for an extended series of issues including education, healthcare, elderly care, employment, housing, etc. for people of different classes. This can prevent the poor from being plunged into deeper poverty because of accidents. Third, the current precision poverty alleviation, especially the work dedicated to increasing the poor's ability for self-sustained development, has to be continued as an important way of poverty alleviation even after 2020. It is the way for us to help people shake off poverty in the long term by enhancing their own skills and money-making abilities. I think if we can well coordinate the 3 methods, we can then basically guarantee the sustainable development of poverty alleviation in China.
By setting that absolute goal, but getting everybody out of absolute poverty, it kind of hides the idea that even if somebody gets just above that line, if they're at a little over 3,000 or 4,000 RMB per year, compared to urban residents, that's still very, very poor. So the whole question of sustainability and progress in making a more just and equal society is a continuing problem that doesn't end in 2020. So I'm interested in your thinking of both of those areas, sustainability and the progress beyond 2020.
What do we do after we win the battle against poverty? Well, we'll not stop our efforts, nor reduce the intensity of investment. Rather, we will only strengthen our policy support. Why? The current standard is still low, so after we have achieved the goal of comprehensively building a moderately prosperous society, we will still aim for a higher standard. And in the meantime, there will be people who fall back below the poverty line again due to market competition. So even though we will eliminate absolute poverty as recognized by the international standard in this campaign, there still will be a long-term battle to fight in order to address relative poverty. So we will not cut back our efforts just because we have achieved the preliminary goal. Well, for some work in some areas, the intensity may be brought down a little, but a long-term effective mechanism is still required, and we have to coordinate development between rural and urban areas to mitigate relative poverty.
How countries that have succeeded in reducing poverty have done that, what other countries can learn from them, what they can't learn from them.
I think the message is important because I think there may be some lack of understanding of what Africa is doing, what China is doing in Africa.
Join hands to, of course, to help in this gigantic struggle to eradicate poverty.
Over the decades, China has lifted over 700 million people out of poverty. Thus, China has become a major contributor to reducing poverty worldwide. Poverty remains a serious problem. The first two goals of the UN Sustainable Development Goals are no poverty and zero hunger. To fulfill these goals for the prosperity of the human community, how might China's solutions and China's wisdom benefit the world? In terms of the UN's grand goals, the millennial goal in the past and now the sustainable goals going forward, how has China participated in that? We know it's had a great contribution.
And I think in terms of China's development experience, it will really be contributing because China has very relevant experience in industrializing, in creating large numbers of jobs for people. And these are the kind of lessons that are important to other countries which either have had very low rates of growth or have had jobless growth, maybe because their economies are based on natural resource extraction, which doesn't really create jobs. So I think China's expertise in industrializing, in creating a manufacturing sector, looking at experimenting with policies to encourage foreign direct investment and so on, as well as domestic investment. These are all very relevant in the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal era, in terms of what other countries have to do, not just to improve the health and the welfare of their citizens, but also to make sure they have decent jobs.
President Xi Jinping now calls for Chinese solutions and Chinese wisdom to apply to other countries potentially in a way that fits with their local conditions, of course. And it would seem that China's poverty alleviation planning and experience is perhaps the most important part that can represent Chinese solutions and Chinese wisdom. So as you look at the world, maybe particularly in Africa, how do you see the applicability of the precision poverty alleviation that's been organized in China in applying in some of these other countries?
In order to address poverty in developing countries, we should enhance the self-development capabilities of people in poverty-stricken areas and enable them to benefit from the country's development. I think this is one of China's experiences that can be applied to most developing countries around the world. The ability for effective organization and implementation is quite critical in poverty alleviation. For countries that have formulated poverty alleviation, the effective implementation of a plan holds the key to delivering the overall poverty alleviation strategy. In recent years, a very important lesson we have learned in precision poverty alleviation is establishing a tiered system emanating from the Central Committee to the provinces, municipalities, counties, townships and village. We have established the corresponding accountability system at each level. In this way, we can guarantee timely and effective implementation of the poverty alleviation methods at each level and the realization of the entire poverty alleviation program.
Clearly, for the next 2 or 3 years, your focus is on meeting your extraordinary goal of 2020, eliminating all abject poverty. But for the future, there are many countries that need China's help in solving poverty in their own countries. But let's say that the head of a developing country, say in Africa, met with President Xi and asked for China's help, and then President Xi turned to you and say, how can your experience help this country? What would be the process that you would go about figuring out how the China experience can help this other country with exchange of officials or training programs? What would be your approach to facilitating China's help of another developing country?
中国在扶贫方面做了不少的工作。
China has done a lot of work in poverty alleviation and received extensive support and assistance from the international community with which we trained our personnel in pilot programs as early as in the 1990s. This we shall never forget. We appreciate the helping hand from developed countries, and we share problems with the underdeveloped ones. We also exchange ideas regarding the similar issues confronting us. So what have we done? We initiated exchange and training sessions with poor countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia every year with dozens of classes. Also, we have specific programs offering China's assistance overseas where personnel training and exchanges are also held. General Secretary Xi Jinping has also answered the call of the United Nations on the 2030 agenda to fulfill major country responsibilities. At the UN conference, he initiated the establishment of a community of shared destiny free from poverty. At the 2015 Poverty Reduction and Development Forum, he delivered a special speech talking about his series of ideas and philosophies. As they visit countries abroad, they also establish cooperation between China and countries in Africa, Latin America, ASEAN, Southeast Asia, etc. However, despite everything, China remains a developing country with a large poor population. We don't have surplus funding. We're also in grave need for more. So currently, we're more open in sharing experiences and best practices. And as we fulfill our goals in poverty reduction and enjoy better growth, we also will increase our investments in poor countries in addition to experience sharing. As a matter of fact, the act of poverty alleviation itself is a contribution to the world. In seeking common development and advancement, we will also do more. Even after China successfully eradicates absolute poverty, it may still be faced with the daunting task of relative poverty. So we will remain committed to this cause and work hand in hand with other countries. We appreciate the help we've received from the world, and we will give back as much as we can. We will never attach any strings to the assistance we provide and cooperate with others with sincerity.
China's targeted poverty alleviation campaign, for all its historic success, faces at least 4 challenges. First, is the data reliable? There's an obvious conflict if the same officials who did the poverty alleviation work also did the poverty alleviation assessment. I've seen independent auditors, often unannounced, checking and spot checking, but I still hear talk that some data is suspect because local officials are under great pressure. Second, there's a natural conflict between officials who want to bring people out of poverty in order to benefit their careers and village people who want to remain classified as poor in order to maximize their subsidies. Third, what's to prevent those who are pushed just over the extreme poverty line after the excitement dies down from falling back down below it? For China's poverty alleviation campaign to be counted a true success, it must be sustainable. Fourth, living barely over the line of extreme poverty, far below standards of living enjoyed by China's urban middle class, hardly makes for a society of common prosperity, China's long-term goal. The fight against poverty cannot end in 2020. The good news is that President Xi and senior officials are aware of these challenges. Looking beyond 2020, China believes its target poverty alleviation can help other countries, fulfilling President Xi's call for Chinese wisdom and Chinese solutions to benefit the world. That's closer to China.